Okay, connections. This is actually something that I'm doing at the Royal Institution. So this is my dream panel. Connections. I'd like to sort of explore connections and how people are connected and what happens. Not just when the social connections happen and sort of serendipitous connections happen, but also how information and culture happens. So my three people would be James Burke, because I love him, absolutely love him. Duncan Watts, who is the senior researcher at the minute at Yahoo Research, who wrote a book called 6 Degrees of Separation in the Electronic Age. And then the third person that I would invite would probably have to be a master connector, would have to be somebody who is exceptionally well connected already themselves. So perhaps somebody like a Stephen Fry or somebody who's very, very well connected, somebody for whom their lives are about connections. So we'd have the person who'd talk about, James Burke would talk about how things are connected and how social history has evolved into sort of scientific reason. And then we've got the researcher who's looking at all of the connections that we have right now online and is creating patterns and asking questions. And then we've got the connector. And I think that would be a really interesting panel. My name is Aleks Krotosky. I'm a technology journalist and a researcher. I have been writing about technology and immersive technologies for almost a decade now. Became so interested and immersed in it that I ended up doing a PhD looking at how information spreads around the web. Future gazing is always a difficult one. I would say storytelling is obviously a very important thing for me, and I think just in terms of how we engage with content in the future. I think wearable technologies are really interesting, whether they're sort of grafted on your skin or put into your clothing. And I remember hearing about maybe 6 or 7 years ago about wearable technologies in Japan that would, you'd tag yourself with 3 or 4 things, whatever it was, girl, scientist, likes, I don't know, likes cooking. And then if you happen to be walking through a crowd and somebody else, indicated that those were 3 things that they also were interested in, then it would bleep and it would tell you that somebody in this crowd was also interested in these things. And I think that will probably evolve, especially as networking and social interaction has become much more mediated by technology. I think we'll take that outside of things like Facebook and outside of things like Twitter, and we'll see people really sort of returning to, I hate to use the expression, the real world, but it will return them to this sort of offline experience of connection. In education, we're starting to see and public service, we're starting to see some really interesting explorations and experiments. There is a danger, of course, that funding cuts are going to undermine a lot of the really interesting new content that's coming out. But I've seen some amazing things coming out of Channel 4 Education, for example, that are targeting 14 to 19-year-olds, that are really using all of the different platforms and touch points for storytelling, for education, for public service information broadcasts. So I think they're definitely really, really interesting to watch. I think that in terms of journalism, what's been fascinating is to see an organization like The Guardian really trying to grapple with this idea of no longer being the only curator, no longer being the only news imparter. A really good example is how they effectively tried to integrate lots and lots of different news sources during the Egyptian riots earlier in 2011, rather than say, here's the Guardian's view. They said, here's the Guardian's view. Oh, and also here's all the eyewitnesses' views. Here's the Telegraph's view. Here's CNN's view, and all of that was sort of pooled together. So I think that kind of storytelling experience in terms of news, very topic based, is a really nice way for a news organization to engage and to create these types of immersive experiences. In terms of entertainment, I think projects like Such Tweet Sorrow and some of the other really experimental things that are going on at the minute with some of the cultural institutions, I think are fascinating, because it's demonstrating that these institutions are willing to try to engage a different type of audience in a different kind of way, and also to really explore the platform for its specific and unique affordances. You wouldn't try and do a TV program on the radio. Well, why would you try and do something? Why would you try and do a TV program on the internet? You know, so how are we learning about how to tell stories? And I think some of the cultural institutions, for some reason, perhaps they're more open to it, are really trying to reach out and to play around with this.